God bless you, everyone. Thank you for joining me, Pastor Pamela, your host on Keep the Testimony Alive. I am so excited to be here another Tuesday doing this episode and live airing. We thank God for sparing our lives. We were here last week and we had a wonderful time. So if you missed our last episode where we talked about Dr. Carter Woodson, please tune in, go and check it out. Keep the Testimony Alive on Facebook or YouTube. So here we are again, another Tuesday. And I promised you that I would be coming to you this month every week because there is so much information to talk about when it comes to Black history in general. Let me just say right now that next week, God's willing, we will be talking about Black history in the church in Canada. So, share this information. And let me just drop that in right now is that if you are not subscribed to our channel, because you do not want to be missing the episodes when we come on live. So please make sure you hit that notification button that you'll be notified every time Keep the Testimony Alive comes on the air. So again, we want to thank God for this time. It is evening after 7 p.m. Eastern Standard Time. Some of you watch from all over: Barbados, Kenya, India, USA, UK, Canada, and we thank you all for your support. I'm going to ask you one more favor is to please make some comments and let us know how you're enjoying our shows, our episodes when we come on. So tonight we have another amazing episode, and I can talk all night. I am finding out so much about my heritage, my history in doing this assignment. And so let me just bring my co-hosts in anyways. Again, last week I had three of my amazing children. And again, this week I also have my children with me. Katura Morris, God bless you, dear. Good to see you. Looking lovely as always. And we have my son, one of my sons anyways. I have two sons, biological sons, Elder Jonathan. He's an amazing teacher, by the way. So if you ever want to hear him teach the word, you want to tune in on our Zoom calls on Sundays. Just got to put that out there. No stress, right? No stress.
Absolutely.
But you certainly have grown in the word. And I so appreciate you, all of my children. We don't have Elder Lionel with us here, but we're going to get him in one of these days and
Yes.
just do a really great topic and theme. So tonight we're talking about Canadian Black history. Wow. I must be honest, is that growing up, knowing my history didn't seem like it was all that important, right? And there still is a lot of folks, a lot of our people that do not know their history. And so when we talk about Black history, it's typically we're talking about Black history from the USA perspective. But tonight we want to bring some information to the forefront when it comes to Canadian Black history.
Absolutely.
Absolutely. Yeah.
And we talked about Dr. Carter Woodson last week, how he was his mission, one of his mission was to educate people and to let the students know that we do have a history, because
Right.
professors were saying to the students that Blacks don't have a history. Well, everybody has a history. So that was crazy. But again, thank you all for coming in. I see some comments already. And please do, as we're discussing, feel free to put your comments in the chat. I think about Canada. This year is going to be 154 years old.
Wow.
154 years old. Is it July the 1st, right? We celebrate Canada Day birthday. So yeah, 154 years old. And you can just imagine all the changes that have happened in all those years. But I thought anyhow that why is it so important to celebrate Canadian Black history? Well, because we've had Blacks come to this country, and they've come at different times. They've come in different waves. And I think next week, my guest speaker can talk about that a little bit. But let me put that question out there. Who knows when the first Black person came to Canada? Around. What do you think?
The first black person to
To some
come
of
to
our
Canada.
guests, to some of our
Okay.
viewers, right? Because I was blown away when I read this. When I read this, I know people have different dates, but I'm going to take what Dr. Afua Cooper. So Dr. Afua Cooper, she is a Jamaican-born Canadian historian, and so she's a professor at the University of Dalhousie in Halifax. And she cited that we do have documentations. So there is documentations um, for what I'm about to say, what date I'm about to give you. Okay.
Okay, we're
So,
ready.
so you ready?
Ready,
You sure,
ready.
you sure you don't want to guess?
I'm probably going to be extremely off. So
Well, I want to hear the extremely off.
the first black.
Yes.
Okay, I'm thinking Harriet Tubman. I'm thinking maybe
Yeah.
the late
1800s?
1800s. Yeah.
1800s. Okay.
I think I'm going to be that difficult person who says, there was natives, First Nations, and there's black in there. Like, that person is so woke. So if my sister's going to say 1800, I think I'll go somewhere in the 17 or 1600s.
Okay.
16. Wow.
I
Okay.
I really don't know. I'm just
Well,
taking a guess.
one of our guests says 1700. Okay.
Yes.
All right. And I think somebody else says, okay, Google, here we come. Well, we're not going to wait for Google because I haven't seen the answer yet. But Dr. Afua Cooper says it's been documented that the first Black person came to Canada in 1604.
Wow.
Wow. See, 1604.
Wow.
1604. So that's over 400 and what, 15, 17 years ago.
Wow.
So Black person came to Canada even before the English came to Canada. That
Wow.
is something else. So
We're
for those of
everywhere.
you who, yeah, for those of you who love history, then you can go on YouTube, Google, and whatever you got to do, and check that out. That when I heard that, I was just like, wow, wow, yay, 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 to, right to Blacks. So I want to talk about a little bit tonight also. Our guests will be coming in not long from now,
Okay.
and they're going to be talking about some of the pioneers, um, and bring it home. Some of the pioneers that came to Canada and what year they came. Because I know, um, let me just touch my father who came to this country approximately, let's say, I came 1966 and he came before that, a couple of years before that. He came ahead of his wife and children to make life, right, to pave the way for us. And so I think about a lot of the Caribbeans that came to this country and that came with a vision. They came with a vision. I know Daddy, when he came with a vision. He came with a mandate from God also. He was a pastor and he came to start a work and just to seek out a better life. So I just wanted to put that in there that this is called Keep the Testimony Alive, and we want to keep their testimonies alive tonight. So they came with vision, they came with their dreams, they sacrificed. Can you imagine leaving your homeland? Not that you really wanted to, but it was the best thing to do at that time, right?
Absolutely.
So they sacrificed their homeland, coming to, a strange land, a strange
Right.
land. But, they were willing to work hard. Your grandfather, and we're going to hear from others, our guests, their parents also. All of them were willing to work hard. They were willing to, whatever it takes, in hopes for a better life, not just for themselves, so much for
Yeah.
themselves, but their generations to come, their children, their grandchildren, etc. And of course, they met upon a lot of obstacles, right? And one of the obstacles that they met upon, of course, was the discrimination. And discrimination, they were discriminated because of the tone of their skin, the color of their skin, whether they were cream, whether they were chocolate, whether they were, really, just very dark, beautiful. I saw a picture the other day of this beautiful girl. She's so dark, but she's so beautiful. And I thought, wow, right? So they came across the discrimination, the prejudice, and we're going to hear more about that soon. So it was because of the skin tone. It could be because of the texture of their hair. I remember I had a good friend in high school, and when I would go to her house, her mother and father would say, "Can we feel your hair? Can we just touch your hair?" And I didn't take an offense because they really wanted to feel, what does our hair feel like, right? And they were just so blown away until I had to say, okay, that's enough now. Right? So it could be the texture of our hair, it could be the accent. So you can imagine, Jonathan Coutura, that they came and some of them had, very deep accents. And so that is a plus plus, or a negative
Mhm.
negative rather, right? So, but nevertheless, we want to remember these people. We want to remember their testimonies. We want to celebrate them tonight. I keep saying tonight, excuse me for those of you who are totally in mourning right now that you'll be watching this. But I remember my father talking about, yes, Canada back in the day was had opened its doors, and I'm kind of more recent. Canada back in the day, in the late 50s, 60s, opened its doors to skilled laborers. So my father was a carpenter, and Canada would say, come on in. You've got skills that we need to help to build this country. And we, as people of color, Blacks, we should be proud that our people definitely contributed to build this country.
Absolutely.
But before Dad came, Bishop Lionel Bryan came, um, I wanted to just quickly highlight to you that Canada had a 1-year ban. The federal government had a ban on some years before my father came. And there's a letter that I'm asking my technical engineer, Jonathan, if you can put up, that might be small for me, but from there. But let me read this letter, because our people do not know the history, some parts of history of Canadian Black history. And there's so much, again, I said last week, and I'm saying it again today, that we're only scratching the surface, right? You're going to have to do some research on your own, because there's just way too much to cover in an hour and a half maximum. So what you're looking at, this is a letter that's on screen. And let me read to you what this letter says. It says, at the Government House of Ottawa. All right. So it says here, present, His Excellency. Here's the letter. It says, His Excellency in Council, in virtue of the provisions of subsection C of Section 38 of the Immigration Act, is pleased to order, and it is hereby ordered as follows: for a period of 1 year from and after the date hereof, the landing in Canada shall be, and the same is prohibited, of any immigrants belonging to the Negro race, which race is deemed unsuitable to the climate and requirements of Canada.
Wow.
So you can imagine, here is a
Wow.
letter, right? Here is a letter
Incredible.
from Ottawa, our headquarters,
Yeah.
right? That is saying that for 1 year, and this was in 1911, the year
Wow.
1911, Black people, if you were of the Negro race, right, our government banned you from coming into Canada because they said we could not handle the climate in Canada.
Wow.
Of course, that was a lie, and we'll talk about why it was a lie, right? So this is crazy. For a period of 1 year, Negroes were prohibited in coming into this country. So let me remind you, originally, Canada was not meant to be a multicultural country. They wanted to keep Canada as a white country for Europeans, right? Of that ethnic group. All right. So after that ban, obviously that ban has been lifted, and that's a couple decades after. That's when my father came to this country, right? So I remember. So moving on quickly, because I know time's gonna. There's so much information, but think about that. That Canada originally did not want to have people of color in this country. That was not their vision for this country. But things have happened that has changed that. And that's what we can touch a little bit on. So I do remember my father, the late Bishop Lionel Bryan, coming to this country as a carpenter. He would come home every now and then, disturbed because he was displeased. I spoke with my eldest brother, Sherman, who lives in Florida. Of course, he's the eldest child, and he could help me with some of this information. But he remembers also, we remember how our father would always tell us that it was the Italians that would be getting the jobs, the higher paying jobs. So what your grandfather, what he used to do, you belong to a union, there's an agency. He would gather all his tools, right? Bring his toolbox, heavy tools down to the agency early morning, sit there and wait for them to say, okay, there is a job here that you're assigned to. And he would notice people coming in after him would be leaving before him. So they'd be calling the whites, right? The non-blacks, to give them the jobs. Even if you look at today, I don't know if you've noticed, but I know 10, 15, 20 years ago, you look at construction workers on the road, you would not see much people of color. It would be a lot of Italians, correct? Right? And so he would remember sitting there for half the day, almost all the day, only for them to tell him, okay, sorry, sir, there's no jobs for you. Meanwhile, there is jobs, but it was given to, right, the other sector and not people who were Black. So you know what? I'm so pleased of him, and I'm going to close on him. Eventually, what did he do? He started his own contracting company. He became his own boss. That's right. He became his own boss and not waiting on anybody. So that's a lesson for all of us to learn, is that sometimes we've really got to roll up our sleeves and do what we have to do. One important set of people that I want to talk about in this country that has helped to build this country and helped to change this country is, we want to talk about the Black railway porters. Black railway porters. All right. So at the beginning of the 20th century, so the late 1900s, railways were the only workplaces that when Blacks came here, they would hire. So it was the railways that would hire Black Canadians. So, Jonathan, if you were back then and you came to this country looking for a better life, the only place that you could get a job as a Black male was working for the railway. All right. So, in that, I want to quote Cecil Foster. I looked up a number of things from him online, and I encourage all of you to go online and check this out. So much information there, right? But these porters, they labored extremely long hours with low-paying jobs. Low-paying jobs. Let me drop that in right now. One of the persons that we do know, one of the pastors that has passed away not too long ago, a few years ago, is the late Bishop Ricketts, Bishop Cecil Ricketts. When he came to this country, I interviewed Elder Lloyd Ricketts and Brother Ronald Ricketts, his two sons. And they had mentioned to me, which I did hear that before, is that Bishop Ricketts was a porter. So when he came to this country, he also was a porter. He worked on the trains, right? And so they work long hours. And I remember Ronald was telling me how Bishop Ricketts they would be away from their homes days at a time, days at a time, just working. They were trained to be like a housekeeper, good housekeepers, domestic on the train. So what does that entail? It would be like they had to sweep the floors, mop the floors, clean washrooms and toilets, uh, anything, carry passenger luggage, serve tea. So they hardly slept. So most they may sleep for 3 to 4 hours a night because they were constantly at the passengers' beck and call, right? And there's so much information again. But one of the things that, John, if you can put up that picture there with the porters, this is, they were dressed to the hilt. They had to be dressed a certain way, certain uniform had to be kept clean and neat and tidy. Uh, they had to have certain manners. If not, of course, they would be at risk of losing their jobs. And remember, this is the only job they could get. So
Mhm.
they had to be very humble and be very attentive to the passengers. A matter of fact, I just recently heard of one story where there was a passenger, he was drunk. This white man was drunk as you could get, and he asked one of the porters for a cup of tea. And meanwhile, the train is, traveling on the tracks, and the tea spilled because he was drunk. And a couple days after, this porter got a letter to say that we no longer need your services because the passenger had complained that the tea spilled, right? It wasn't his fault, but this is what we're seeing back then is how they had to be so attentive and diligent to their
Wow.
job. So that's a picture there. What we're seeing is a porter, and we're seeing some of the passengers going in the train. So yes, CN Rail, Canadian National. I was told Bishop Ricketts worked for CP Rail, and then I think when they had closed down, then it was CN Rail. So CP, Canada Pacific Railway, and then it was CN Rail. So that's just some interesting information for those of us who know some of these bishops and pastors. We see them, a few years ago, but we don't know the background of them, right? And we don't know what they
Absolutely. Right.
have gone through. They had to be making people's beds, polishing the shoes of the passengers, you name it. The passengers would also call them and address them not by their names. They would just address them as George. So everybody, every porter was a George. And this made them feel, of course, no dignity, no individuality. And so eventually, they would also still, even though they were called George and they didn't like it, but they would have to respond very courteously with a smile and a nod. You can imagine inside, deep down inside, they were burning, right? But this is some of our history where some of our forefathers are coming from to make life easy for me, for you, for all of us today. Excuse me. There is a book again out by Dr. Cecil Foster, and Dr. Foster, he is a Canadian novelist, journalist, scholar. He's a professor at the University of Buffalo of the College of Arts and Sciences. And so, if you can put that book up there, that we can see. The book is called, for those of you who want to go out and get that book, it's called "They Call Me George: The Untold Story of Black Train Porters and the Birth of Modern Canada." Okay, modern Canada. All right. Um, Again, we have porters. What I like with them is when they were displeased with um, their, how do I say it now, with the environment, the working environment. They were paid little and nothing, not much. They worked hard. They didn't get a lot of sleep. They didn't have any rights. A matter of fact, they didn't even have a right to become a Canadian citizen. So even though they worked hard for years, some of them for decades, they were not allowed to become a Canadian citizen in Canada
That's
because
awesome.
Canada, that was not their original vision for this country. Their vision was for this country was that it would be the Northern White, right? And so what eventually happened is that these porters came together, and I'm really summarizing really quick because there's so much information to fill in. But these porters, they came together and they said, enough is enough. And so what they did is in 1954, there was one of the sleeping carts that was trains that was chartered, and they filled up that train with porters, former porters, allies, friends that was on their side. And when I say friends, we're talking about usually, typically, they were Jewish people, right, back then, because these porters, they were on their own, protesting for change. But 1954, they chartered this train and they went to visit Ottawa, and they were saying enough is enough. And what was their mission? It was to change this country. They said, no, we cannot have this country where we are being excluded and where we do not have equality. So
That's
what
good.
they wanted to do is they're saying to Ottawa, who should become a Canadian citizen? Right? Because back then it was only the white British subjects were accepted as citizens. And so
Citizens.
they wanted these porters who worked on trains. Many of them were educated coming from their country, right? But coming to this country, that was the only thing that they could do. So they wanted a change. They wanted a new nation. They wanted all people of the world should have equality. They wanted privileges should not only be for a certain specific group, but that every
Mhm.
member of society should have an opportunity to rise, right? Based on their ability and their creativity. And so what they had to do, they went to Ottawa to fight the social system and ultimately pushing Canada to change its immigration policies. And hence, eventually, I'm really summarizing, we have multicultural, right? So
Awesome.
train porters, right? We take our hats off to them, right? We salute them, the train porters,
Yeah.
those who had worked in those early years. They, someone said they turned Canada black, brown, and a host of other shades. So let's give it up to the porters that were working on the trains, working extremely hard.
Awesome.
Yes,
Awesome.
they want that book. And again, that book is written by Cecil Foster. They Call Me George. If you look up They Call Me George, you'll get that book. You'll find it. It should be online where you can order that book. So much information.
So much.
When I talk about when I talk about some of these pastors, Bishop Bryan, Bishop Ricketts, and so many of them, Bishop Dawson, Bishop Hall, like the names go on and on. I'm so pleased to have one of my friends with me. She's a sister of one of my best friends in high school, Sister Carol Alexander, and she's one of our guests today. Sister Carol, if we can bring her in and joining us. God bless you, Sister Carol. Welcome to Keep the Testimony Alive.
Oh, thank you. I've been really enjoying it so far.
Wonderful, wonderful. You have not changed. You look the same from I was a young girl. Your sister and myself, we went to high school together, and you were there when I go to the home. And your
Yep.
mother and father and your family has been so hospitable to me, even when I was a young girl, high school. But you love the Lord, and you were always such a graceful woman of God. And it's so good to have you here tonight.
Oh, thank you.
So your parents, they have gone on before. They have gone on before.
Yeah.
Tell us a little bit of history, because they were here long before my father. What year they came, and just give us some nuggets that we can take with us tonight.
All right. So I would like you to put on screen the arrival passport stamp. Okay. So can you hear me?
Yes, yes.
Yes. So if you could put up the passport, and that shows the date of arrival in Canada.
Absolutely.
So my family arrived in Canada July 31st, 1958. And this
Wow.
is my mother's passport that had 4 names, and my father's passport had 1 other name because 5 of us came.
Five of you.
5 children came, and then 2
Okay.
were born in Canada.
Oh,
Now,
yes. Mhm.
now, um, the history goes like this. Early in the 1950s, I had a great uncle George, and his name was George Baldnavis, and he was working on as a cook on a ship. And when the
Mm.
ship landed in Toronto, he jumped ship. And then over a period of time, he became landed. So this is early in the 50s because my parents now they're coming in 58. So he was here many years before.
So, Sister Carol, can you explain for those who don't understand jump ship? What does that?
It means that normally you're hired to work on the ship and you go wherever the ship goes. Well,
Mm-hmm.
when the ship came to Toronto, he decided he wasn't going to go any further with this ship. So he got off the ship and never got back on and sought out.
And he was the cook.
Yes, he was a cook. I imagine they probably had more than one, but he decided he wasn't going back on. And eventually he found his way to get landed in Canada. So
Wow.
he was the pioneer of our family coming here. So then after a number of years, he sent for his sister, which is my grandmother, um, Mabel Squire Balnavis. And she brought um, the son she had at home, which is Eric Squire, which became Bishop Eric Squire, Pastor Squire. So she
Mm.
brought him to Canada. So that means they preceded us because we came in 58. So they came before 58. And then it was through my grandmother that she sent for my mom and dad and their family. But the good thing is when we arrived in Canada, we arrived landed. We didn't have
Mm-hmm.
to go through a period of trying to get papers. We were granted immigrant status, which is a good break because
Yes.
as you know, some people wait for years,
Yes.
even
Yes.
after arriving legally to
Right.
get their landed
Right.
status. So that was
Mm-hmm.
a real bonus. But I
Mm-hmm.
will say that, at that time I was 4 years old. And so I've spent most of my life in Canada. And at that time in Canada, throughout the school system, it was very rare in school or on the street to see another black face for many
Yes.
years, not till about the 60s before
Mm.
you would see. Because I can go back to my school photographs, how they would take them each year, and you don't see black faces. You don't see a lot of multicultural faces. You see predominantly, you know, non-colored faces.
Mm-hmm. Mm-hmm.
And so it wasn't until about the 60s that you would start to see some people with some color. Now, because they were like pioneers in Canada, they faced a lot of the different kinds of hardships. Like, for example, in the school system, there was a lot of prejudice. And my father had to rescue my brother, for example, from being kept in a retarded class, a class for slow people, just because he
Mm.
was black. And also, if you spoke with an accent, I know that my teachers, they worked hard in getting any Jamaican accent out of me. So you had to say it like the Canadians said it. And they even
Mm-hmm.
put me in a speech class for a little while. So
Oh,
they really
wow.
worked at getting the accent out of you. And also too, there was injustices in the school system. An example of this is my oldest brother went to Western Tech High School, and he did an assignment, and he had a friend that copied his assignment. He was given a low mark. His friend with the exact assignment got a good mark. And it
Oh,
was
my.
just simply a lot of prejudice would go on. You didn't
Mm-hmm.
always get what you were worth in the school system. Um, in terms of church, sad to say, in church there was a mixture of prejudice, and I'm not going to dwell long on that because I know you're going to have a session on church. But even in the church we attended, which was the First United Pentecostal Church on 719 Greenwood, we were for a long time with my uncle and grandma, the only black people in the church for a number of years.
Oh,
And so
wow.
some people had open hearts and some people had very closed hearts. Some people would let you know because you're black. And then we also received kindness at the hands of the church. Now,
Mm.
for example, of some of the things, one thing that was done. Now, there was a period in which, so I got both a good story to tell you and a bad one. So there was a period in which my father was very sick with his back. In Jamaica, he had been a policeman, but he wasn't a policeman over here.
Mhm.
And so there was a time his back became so bad that he couldn't really work. He had to lie a lot on the floor. He had a big, thick back brace. I remember in our cabinets, you'd see these huge pills like overgrown Smarties filling up the medicine cabinet. And so our family was in hardship. Now there were 7 kids. My mother, when she first came to Canada, did a little bit of housework. That's about what the ladies could get. Worked hard for just a little money and some mistreatment with it. Sometimes you treated not only people, but their pets as well. So she did a little work, but then eventually, having 7 children and a husband not working, she couldn't work. So we ended up in Regent Park and housing. Now, some of the church uh, was kind to us. At Christmas time, they would help us out with some food and some gifts and
Mhm.
things. But
Mm.
also, we had, prejudice things happen as well. Now, one of the things occurred one year where the church decided to take up an offering to assist us. And apparently, a lot of people gave from their heart to try to help us out, knowing it's a
Mm.
large family, nobody's working. But apparently, one of the ladies came to visit us, and when she heard how much we got, she was said, "No, that's not how much. There was a lot more money," and we came
Oh.
to learn that the pastor had taken what he wanted out of it,
Oh my.
and then we got a portion of what
What
was,
was left? Oh
yeah,
my.
of what was
Mm.
supposed to be us. And this is, a Pentecostal pastor. And
Wow.
so, but here's a wonderful thing that happened. This is what turned our life around. And some of those young people are still alive today. There was a group of young people at the church that were on fire for God. Among them was Brother Budgel, who was a pastor in Brantford,
Mhm.
and
Mhm.
Brother Kierstead, I believe he's now deceased, and Brother Budgel's girlfriend, which at that time is the person who's his wife, Marlene Timbers, and the Timber sisters. And they came and they prayed for my father. That
Mm.
night, my father, by faith, because he was a man of faith, raised his hand over his head. Now, when you have a really bad back, that's hard.
Yes.
And from that day forward, by faith, he kept it improving till my father became well enough that in due time he was able to work as an orderly at Sunnybrook Hospital. This
Mm.
turned the whole destiny of our family around
Wow.
because, from my father working,
Mhm.
eventually he was able to buy his own house. We got out of housing and he had a few houses, you know, was able to change from one house to another. But all this was from the miracle of what those young people did. So there
My.
was still some Holy Ghost fire back there. There was an
Amen.
experience with God that was transforming, and it
Yes.
transformed my life. I
Thank you.
remember all I had to do Monday morning was go in to my father's bedroom, stick out my hand, and get my lunch money. And
Mm.
all that happened because now I had a working father. So
Yes. Yes.
I give God glory that there was both good, but thank God there were still some good people that had open hearts and that loved God. So that
Mhm.
was a little bit of a quick little church tidbit. Now, my father, in trying to get work, it was difficult. He couldn't go in the police force. They said he was too old, and he'd been a policeman for many years in Jamaica. And so he did odd jobs. I remember he worked at one time helping at a construction site, but they didn't think he was worth paying and they took off. They never paid him. Um, and it was difficult to get a place to live. Um, Eventually, my parents had to move from living with my great uncle and grandma and had to try to get a place of their own. And it was very difficult because the places would be available till they saw your color. And then after they
That's right.
saw your
That's
color,
right.
it was
Yes.
difficult to get a place to rent, and
That's right.
neighbors were not too nice. And
Mhm.
so there was a lot of issues you dealt with in trying to get housing and just to live back then. But thank God, eventually my father was able to get work like quite a few black people, quite a few black men and women did in hospitals.
Mm.
And my father eventually got a job as an orderly and he worked at Sunnybrook Hospital for many years. And you did a lot of hard work. You fed
Mhm.
patients, you bathed them, you wheeled them to operations, and they moved you around, and you weren't always treated nicely. But
Mhm.
thank God, you'll find out a lot of black people they ended up working for hospitals, nursing homes, but
That's right.
a lot of them in the hospital and often
Hmm.
as
Hmm.
either housemaids or orderlies or cleaning people. But
Right.
thank God at least somebody, hired them. So that gives a little bit of some of the things that my parents faced. I know as kids growing up, we dealt with prejudices in the school, blatant name calling,
Mm.
mistreatments, but we just kept working through it. And my father was determined. He brought us here and he thought there was no reason why we all couldn't at least at a minimum finish high school.
Hmm.
And so thank God we all managed to push through and get through that barrier, and some went on to further education. But it
Right.
was it was all because the country did give us an opportunity to be there, and then eventually they began to open some doors. And the wonderful thing about education in Canada, it was, you know, free. And so you just had
Yes.
to you dealt with obstacles of prejudice, but it was free. And so as a result, some of the children of immigrants were able to get some education and be able to do better with their life than their parents did. And I think that was the background desire of many parents who came. They wanted a better life for themselves, but mostly they
And
were looking out
children.
for their heritage.
That's right. That's right. And listening to you, Sister Carol, people would think that no, it can't be. Like some people might be in denial that this is in our head. So, for example, people go for looking for a place that if they could rent a place, and when they see the color of your skin, sorry, it's not available.
Yeah.
But if you sent your white friend, right, the white friend could say, yeah, it's available. And
Yes.
it's just something else to know that those things, it's real. It's
Yes.
real.
Well, my eldest brother married a Canadian girl, and
Hmm.
you see, they were a mixed couple got a lot of abuse from both ends, from the
Yes.
black people, and they got it from the white people.
Hmm.
And, if my sister-in-law would go, she could get certain things, but if my brother went, no.
Hmm.
So it was very blatant. I know what it's like, for example, to go on a job and do the employment test and do it well, so well that the human resources person said, this is the best score we've had, you've done
Mm.
really, really great, but only not to be hired. I go in, I sit there for the interview, the lady starts asking me insulting questions like, do you think you could manage this work? And I've got the best score she's had all day, but she had the mentality that I would be, she thinks in her mind that I would be dependent, that I wouldn't be able to manage the job. You dealt with a lot of that when you went on the job. You often had to prove yourself. They would
Of
follow
course.
you up very quickly, follow up on your work, and just be right behind you. You never could just feel comfortable and be like somebody else who was hired. You always had to do this extra proving.
Go
Many
the extra
times
mile.
Many times when you saw somebody that had color and they had a little bit of a standing in the job, often they had twice as much terms of education as the people
Mm.
under them. So there
Hmm.
was a lot of extra proving yourself that you have to do when you have color. And it becomes a part of your mentality where you just begin to think that way because you experience it so much.
So
And
much. So
yeah, that
much.
you begin to think that way, that you almost need to have your thinking corrected to think that you could just be like somebody else that has normal abilities and different ranges of skill. But you went through a good portion of your life having to prove yourself continually.
Yes.
I'd
Yes.
actually like to step in there too as well, Sister Carol, because myself now, working in corporate Canada for numerous years as well. It's interesting things that I've actually kind of seen today that show me that a lot of the practices or a lot of the experiences that you have, they're still somewhat ingrained and still permeate the world
Yeah,
as it is today. When I think about even when myself going up throughout corporate Canada and going higher promotions and things of that sort, I saw challenges. I saw, at times where I was passed over, knowing that I'm more qualified.
yes,
But I also see certain things in terms of the mentality. So sometimes when I'm doing an interview for a position to bring somebody onto my staff, if I don't hire someone, I find that people that are predominantly not, let's say non-minorities, the white people and things of that sort, there's a sense of entitlement that they're almost sometimes shocked that they didn't
Yeah.
get the position. I find, and it's interesting in all my years of doing interviews and hiring and firing and all this stuff, I've never ever had a black person ever ask for a follow up as to why didn't I get the position or what could I have done wrong. I've
Yeah.
never had a black person do
Wow.
that.
Mm,
I will
mm,
Yeah.
get that from the white people, surprised as that they didn't. And so, what was
mm,
wrong with my interview and
mhm,
that mentality? But I've
Yeah.
never ever seen a black person ask. And I wonder if there's some ingrained thought that if we didn't get the
mm.
position, well, we just didn't deserve it, or
Yeah,
we
yeah.
didn't earn it, and so
Yes.
we
Yeah.
never consider, well, what did I
Mhm.
do wrong? What could I do better?
Yeah.
I've never ever experienced a black
Isn't
person
that something
asking
Right.
else?
that
Right.
either.
And
Wow.
there's two other things too. I know of people that they get so far in their corporate job, and then they start training all these people who go by them. So
Yes.
they use them like trainers to pass on information, and then these people are all getting jobs over their head.
Mm.
Hmm.
That's something that goes on. And
Mhm.
another thing is if you get in a position where you hire, the people around you are expecting you, watching that to see if you're hiring your own people. They're filling up the office with your own color. So you get
Right.
a very strong, watchful eye over that. So
Mm.
there are, these days it's existing, but a lot of it under the carpet more. Not as blatant, but it's very much there. If you look at the top managers and directors, even in the city of Toronto, you'll find that the upper levels are have fewer colors in it and nationalities.
Would you say that we have come to now accept that this is the reality and we're not even going to try? Our young people are not even going to push and try. Are we feeling sorry for ourselves? What would you all
No,
say?
I would say now, because they recognize how bad the situation is, they had to write laws where they
Mm.
say you have to hire, in some cases, some minority, or you have to make it look like the city. So we had to have laws that were put in place to help us
Yeah.
get hired. And
Yes.
and even for now, for example, if you look in the US and they want to get a new judge, they're saying we would like to have a black judge to represent some kind of color. But when you look at it, they had to make a special case of it. It should be a norm that anybody could be hired if you have,
Anybody. That's
you
right.
know. But
It's
when
Yeah.
they
not.
have to make a special law or a special selection, and then the other side starts to say, well, it's no longer by ability, now it's by ethnic group. So if you don't have the ethnic group, you can't get through the door in certain
Yeah,
jobs.
yeah.
So, but when you
To me,
see they
it's
have to write a law and make special provisions to make special selection, it's because the door hasn't been very open.
That's
yeah,
right.
very
That's
good
right.
point. We see that,
Yeah,
we call it affirmative action.
yeah,
I know in the United States right now, the NFL is under fire
yes,
because of its
Mm.
hiring practices and
yeah,
realizing that, the league itself is 75 to 80% black. But in
right,
terms of a coach,
Coaches.
up until like a last day or two, there was only one black coach and
right.
there are zero black owners
Right. And
as
what's
the football.
interesting about that case was actually he heard the feedback. So
Yeah.
it wasn't his imagination. He
Yeah.
actually got he was sent information that was
Yeah,
Accidentally
not meant
text.
for
Yeah.
him. So he actually got it on in writing. So it's
yeah.
not
Mm-hmm.
even his imagination or his intuition. And that kind of lets you know there are people that have open hearts, but it's very much an uphill battle
Still a lot of
still.
work. Yeah.
And then we also have the flip side where we have people of color that have not been productive and have not been very nice people. So they didn't help the journey any. So
Absolutely.
we have to be mindful that we also try to raise children that are good people and
Amen.
that are
Amen.
willing to work at skills and get them and earn
That's right.
skills, not
And
expect
don't.
the door to be given to them because they're
That's
black
right.
now. Yeah.
Exactly.
Correct. Absolutely.
Don't expect the handouts because
Right.
I'm
Right.
black. So can you just help me out here because I'm black? No, no. You got to earn it. You got to work. You got to become passionate about it and achieve because it's all
Yeah.
there for all of us to achieve.
Yes, and the
right?
other side of it is the education, because we have the young people that have come up under, this subsequent generations. But the problem in the school system, you find a lot of them heading not to the universities and colleges, but into the trades, because for us, we're just trying to live, right? And
That's
we
right.
could use more people in the upper levels, like in the universities, in the
Hmm. Hmm.
and get the other kinds of education. But a lot of our people, even our young people, tend to head to the trades because we know at least we can make a living that way. It is kind of
Right.
sad.
Yes. Sister Carol, thank you so much
You're
for
very welcome.
Awesome.
for your
Thank you.
contribution.
Thank you.
Amen. You are an amazing woman of God. Amen. And so let's keep in touch. All right.
All right. God bless you, and
God bless you.
Bless
Thank you
you.
so
added
much.
blessings to your program. Bye bye.
Thank you. Wow, that was good. She's always got
Wonderful.
something good information. As I said, her sister was my best friend in high school. So
Wow.
when I go to the house, she's always there.
Right.
And I remember her mother, father, brothers, etc. All right, let's get ready for our next guest, brother Jonathan. If we can bring in our next guest, he also has um, some nuggets to share for us. This is Elder Michael Dawson, the son of a trailblazer, the son of a pioneer, Bishop Dawson. Welcome, 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 Elder Michael.
God bless you, Pastor. And
God
God
bless
bless
you.
you, Sister Katira and Brother Jonathan. It's great to be
Bless
here.
you.
Yes, sir.
Thanks for coming in. Thanks for coming in. I There's so much pleasant memories. I think Jonathan, don't you have a memory of his father?
I do. I don't. My brother for sure, absolutely. But for sure,
Okay,
just growing up
maybe
watching him for sure,
maybe it
absolutely.
was okay. Maybe it's of a Lionel. Okay, I thought it was yourself. But so much memories growing up as a young girl, seeing your father, your mother, your family,
Mhm.
coming to your church. You guys at one time were the top singers in Toronto, the young people. I'm telling y'all, they could sing. They could sing.
We are
And
blessed.
so, yes, memories, good memories, good memories. And so here you are tonight to just share some little nuggets of your parents when they came to this country, the challenges, any challenges that they had, and just how they overcome. Give us some your nuggets.
Well, my mother, she came to Canada first with her sisters in either 1960 or 61, and then my mother was able to bring my father to Canada in 1961. It didn't take that long because they got
Mm-hmm.
married in Jamaica.
Okay.
So, like what Sister Carol mentioned, there was an open door for those from Jamaica, the
That's
Caribbean
right.
islands, to migrate into Canada, England, or United States. And so, my mother, she, I guess today you would call it, she was a personal support worker,
Hmm.
and so she was able to work in the hospital with her sisters. I think the hospital, I believe, was Toronto General Hospital
Hmm.
downtown. And my father, he also worked at a hospital, and then eventually he started to work at Goodyear for so many years, and he was there for a good while. And he also, um,
Well, instead of getting into all of the what they
yes,
were doing,
right,
I kind of want to know what obstacles did they face? So
yes,
coming back in those early years, because I remember you mentioned something to me that he knew your father, especially knew how to deal with racism.
yes. My father and my mom, they were able to have a good demeanor when it comes to dealing with racism. And they taught us the importance to be very courteous, um, but at the same time, they had to make they have to make their voice heard.
Okay,
Um,
so they didn't take it personal,
no, no,
but they did
uh,
something good with what they were experiencing.
right. They were kind people, but at the same time, sometimes they would have to show some teeth, let them understand we're not going to stand for this. I remember
Good.
I remember when we were in elementary school. This was King George, not King George, Pauline School, right at Wallace and Dufferin.
Mm-hmm.
And my sister, she came home complaining about a white boy that was causing her problems in class. So the next morning, before they went to into the building, my father stood right beside a teacher that
Okay.
allowed the students to come in.
Mm-hmm.
So Grace told Dad, "This is the boy," and he said, "Are you the one that's been touching, hitting my daughter and causing problems?" I said, "If you do this one more time, I will take off my belt and roast your skin." And he did it right before the teacher. And my father had a very loud voice.
Yes,
So
he's
that
got
was
this
intimidating.
baritone voice.
Yeah,
Yeah.
yes, yes. And it was loud. So everybody in the schoolyard was playing and getting into the school. And all they hear this loud voice. I say, if you touch her again, I'm going to take off my belt and roast your skin. And that boy never touched Grace. Um,
Okay.
but another story also, when I was in grade 8, and I want to go to a level, back in the days we called it level 4,
Mm.
level 4, level 5 high school. And systemic racism played a role that the vice principal and the guidance counselor gave me a hard time, and also my sister Angela. Now, we were bright children, but because a lot of visible minority Black students were pushed to a level 3 high school, because, in all honesty, they don't feel that we should be going to that back day running me collegiate, Western Tech,
Mm-hmm.
Humberside.
Mm-hmm.
Push them at Humberside, and they'll get an odd job. But
Mm.
my mom made it very crystal clear by going into that school, talking to the vice principal and the guidance counselor, you are going to make sure that they will be going to Runnymede Collegiate, Humberside, Western Tech,
Awesome.
because
Awesome.
that is what they need to do. So I encourage parents to advocate for your children,
That's right.
because
Awesome.
the education, like the educators, and unfortunately they're mostly white. They like to use this word misunderstood.
Mm.
It's not misunderstood. They know exactly what they want to do. They have an agenda, hidden agenda, and we have to advocate for our children. I advocate for my daughter, and she's going to advocate for her children.
Mm-hmm.
Systemic racism is going to exist,
Mm-hmm.
but we need to continue to fight
Right.
and to make sure that our voices are heard,
Mm-hmm.
and to root out this discrimination and racism, whatever you want to call it,
Mm-hmm.
out of our education, and also in every area in this country.
And if we can, and even if we never get rid of it, I
Right,
think we have the power as to how we respond to
right,
discrimination. And that's what I'm seeing, and that's what I'm getting here, is
right.
that we need to teach. We need to teach it to our children, our
Yes,
folks, not to be offended, right? But I think we need, as you said, show some teeth. I think sometimes our people don't feel confident to
right,
speak up and to,
right.
make their voices heard. And this is
Absolutely.
what when I just did my piece a few minutes ago, how the Black porters came together and made their voices heard, and
Right.
so there was changes. But I think that's
Yes.
really what we need to do: is not take an offense,
Right.
not get into crime, not
Right.
be angry,
Right.
right? Not resort to the gun. I'm big and bad and mean, right?
Right.
I think we can use education, and I think Ella Johnson, you're going to talk briefly, just in about one more minute, to the education back then. So I thank you. I remember one more piece you were mentioning about how your father found it difficult just to get a loan from the bank
That's
because
right.
of his skin tone.
Right. Uh, we have very quickly. We're already at 238 Rosemount. My father had a vision to purchase 33 McCormick Street. He had a
Hmm.
great credit record rating. He had money in his account. Uh, so it was a proven that we can take care and purchase and pay off a church building. And with CIBC said to them, deny them of the loan. And of course, my father was discouraged. But because of his passion and desire, he went to a mortgage broker, a private, to get a private lender.
Private loan. Yeah.
And thank be to God, we were able to get it, and where we are right now because of his tenacity and drive, and having a wife, Mother Dawson. She was very
There you go.
encouraging
Yeah.
to stick beside him
Mm-hmm.
and to make sure that the church, the next, not this generation, my generation, but the next generation is able to enjoy and to build what's already there right now.
Awesome. Awesome.
Yes,
And what I hear is being resilient, knowing how to
right.
bounce back, right?
That's right.
Even if the doors close on us and it
Right.
hurts our face, our nose, right?
That's right.
But find a way to come back.
That's
Find a
right.
way.
That's right. There's
Elder
a door.
Dawson,
There's a
thank you
door.
so much for joining us. We got to get you back on one of these days again.
Absolutely.
Uh,
Absolutely.
and we'll talk maybe a different theme, of course. Have an
Absolutely.
awesome, awesome, amazing night. Thank you. We
You
love
too.
you. And let's
Thank you
keep in
so
touch.
much.
You're very welcome. Thank you. God bless you and keep up good work.
Thank
Take
you.
care.
Thank
Bye-bye.
you.
Blessings.
Elder Jonathan, you're going to talk to us about the education back then.
Yes, well, I mean, honestly, I think our two foregone guests have certainly touched on really the major parts of it. I think if we're just looking at it from the perspective of the history of Canadian students, Black students, people going through, I think they've both touched on a little bit of their experiences that they've
Yes.
seen.
Yes.
And I think it's important for us to note and for everyone to note, as I've talked about it even in our show last week, that we need allyship, right? I mentioned that last week, the aspect of helping the cause. I think Sister Carol said it that sometimes not everyone has helped the cause, right? Not everybody, just because someone has our color of skin does not necessarily mean that they're advocating in perhaps the correct way, right? Maybe some people turn to violence or turn to some other means that don't necessarily help the way. We have to be mindful of what we're doing. I love what El Dawson said there in terms of advocating for our children, right? Advocating for the next generation, the future generation,
Mm-hmm.
because the system that we have, our school education system, and while in some, depending on the context that you're looking at it, may look at our Canadian system and says, wow, one of the best systems we have in the world. Right now, there are studies out there that would rate Canada as the number one country for quality of life. And we've had that ranking for more than just this year. We've had it for a little while. And there are a few countries that tend to get ranked as the top countries for quality of life. And generally speaking, it's going to be Canada and some of those Scandinavian countries out there,
Mm-hmm.
Switzerland and Sweden, and some of those areas, things that are predominantly white. And what's interesting to note is while it takes a lot of things into account, like education, healthcare, crime, GDP, all those things, you have to look deeper down into the layers, look at it on a more micro level to see some of these things, like we're seeing as Elder Dawson brought in systemic racism, right?
Yes.
It's interesting to note that some of the things that they were experiencing back, how many years ago, are still very, very, very common, right? It's still very common for Black students to be kind of pushed into the classes that are a little bit more challenged, right? As Sister
Yes.
Carol's
Yes.
brought in, having
Right.
some
Right.
needing to get some training and things of that sort. And we have, as a community, especially in Toronto, they moved through years of advocacy and heated public debates. And in 2009, we had the establishment of the first Afrocentric alternative school. And I remember hearing about this years ago, back when this was up for debate in terms of this school that was going to be kind of designed for Black people, right? Or at least that's how they put it, as if it was just Blacks. Of course, one of the good things I love about the school was actually open to not just Blacks, but anyone could still
Mm-hmm.
come into those
Mm-hmm.
schools. And I think that's really, really good, and it lines up so much with what I think we need to do is it's not just the educating of black kids, but it's the educating of white kids and Chinese kids and Indian kids
That's right.
and all kids, right? Everyone has to learn, because I think it's important for us, and this is why we're doing programs like this, to make sure that black people are educated, but to the large scope, right? There's only so much we can do being educated, but how do
Yes.
we educate others? I think when we look at it from the education system, there are little things that I didn't notice as much. And I remember that myself and my sister, we talked about this briefly, that when we were growing up in school, there were things that were kind of sometimes subconsciously put out there, or at least
Liminal messages. Yeah.
subliminal messages that we internalized, right?
Hmm.
So I remember the first time getting my first black female teacher. We never had black teachers. Teachers
Mm.
weren't black, right? So the people who were teaching us the education were almost 99% of the time always white, right? You very rarely saw someone that was of a different color, different ethnicity. So they couldn't understand, our culture. A funny story I remember telling, and God forgive us, but I remember in the school that I was in was predominantly, or at least it felt predominantly Italian,
Yeah.
right?
Hmm.
And so, you find that we were able to get certain things that the schools that were predominantly black didn't get, right? We were
Mm.
able to get certain levels of education or support or money, finances, things like that. And I remember one time, a couple of us black people, we started telling the teachers that the do rags that you wear, because you weren't
Yeah.
supposed to wear hats, we started telling them that it was a part of our culture, so that we could wear them in class. But because there are no black teachers, no one of any black, we went on for a couple of weeks and they didn't know. They were just like, okay, it's a part of the culture. We're gonna let it go. So you had all the black guys wearing do rags, and they thought it was a part of our culture. It just goes to show again that, like, when there isn't any representation of ourselves in there, how
Correct.
can they understand us, right? And I
Correct.
use that kind of from that aspect of the joke
Hmm.
of they couldn't
Hmm.
understand this the culture. Well, this is something as small as a do rag, which is for nothing more than your hair, but
Hmm.
they don't understand us. They don't understand when we're going through certain things or certain issues. They couldn't speak to that.
Yes.
And I think it's an interesting thing. I think the concept of segregation in school. I think it was back in the early 1800s. In 1850, we had the Common School Act that set into law something that has been practiced in Ontario schools, and really throughout Canada, but certainly just putting a focus in our local Ontario. And what that act was, the Common School Act of 1850, it was basically an act that permitted any group of 5 black families to ask the local trustees or anyone to establish a separate school. But what also was kind of, worked its way in there is the law also permitted the creation of different schools that were not just black, but separate schools for, say, the Roman Catholics and
Yeah.
Protestant families, right? I
Mhm.
myself went to a Catholic school. This
Catholic.
law
Yeah.
kind of encapsulated a lot of that stuff. And the purpose of the law was intended to allow for freedom of choice, right,
Hmm.
in various communities. Um, it gave a lot of racial separatists the ammunition they needed to reinforce the racial segregation. So,
Mm.
let the black people go and kind of have their black school. Let the Chinese people have their Chinese schools. And so, while the intention was really there to kind of protect or to allow for that, it really fell very woefully shy of the ideal. And so, what we saw in Sister Carol and Elder Dawson and yourself, that you all experienced, is there's a lot of times where black children were isolated or sometimes even turned away from being permitted to come into the common schools, right? They were oftentimes forced to, if they were admitted in, they were often forced to sit on separate benches or isolated within the classroom spaces. And we saw a lot of situations where they were not allowed to kind of get the education that was going to allow them to move on further in their education. They were put into classes as if they were challenged and things like that. And if you look at it today, I looked at some of the statistics, even to this day, the representation of minority students and predominantly black people in the school, in the classes that are for the gifted,
Mm.
is substantially low, right? So
Wow.
even if you have a high representation of black kids in the classes, those that are of the gifted class, you're going to see that there's such a very small portion, if any, of blacks. But those that are in the classes that are geared for those that are challenged, you'll see a higher portion of blacks. And it's not to say that our black children are foolish or dumb. By no means. There's
That's right.
nothing at all
That-
that's causing that. It's not, family life at home. Is there a mother or father at the home? It's something that we see that the schools themselves start to strain them in, right? They're
That's correct.
misunderstood, or
Mhm.
they've got a lot of energy, so maybe they need to be put on Ritalin and things like that. They try to start streamlining black
Yes,
kids
yes.
towards these type of things, whereas they're much more likely to see the giftedness in a white child, depending on their parents and things of that sort. So
Wow. That's
I
that's that's amazing. Just all that information, and it brings me back to my childhood days, school days. So, you know, awesome, just awesome information. There's so much. I felt like I think we all feel like we're back in university when we had to do this episode or the episodes for this month because not that we're any researchers or anything like that, but just reading a little bit and bringing it to the forefront in this platform. It's just so much, and it's opened up my eyes and how we need to be so appreciative of
Yeah.
those shoulders of those giants that we stand on so we can see further down the road. And we're hoping that with this platform is that even eventually that our young people who see this will be intrigued to go back to school,
yeah
get your degree. I remember when I was going to university, it took somebody to say, yeah, you can do it. Right. So we need every one of us, our viewers, and every one of us who will be viewing this live or after, please let your children push them, right? Encourage them. Let them know they've got it in them. They are gifted, right? There's just something that needs to be stirred up and awoken there. But I think with prayer also and taking action, I think we're going to be getting somewhere and changes are going to happen. Katura, you're here. And I know we want to have your contribution before we leave. Again, we can be here for hours, but I know that you are passionate about what you're going to bring to us. So the floor is yours.
Thank you again for having me this week. This has been
You're
awesome.
welcome.
I think when it comes to Black history, I'm very passionate about it. Just learning about our history and those that have gone before us and those that sort of pioneered the way. And it is
Mm,
quite rare because we don't get to hear a lot about our Canadian history, Canadian
mhm,
Black history. And so just in, those of us that have been paying attention to our money, you might be aware and have seen a beautiful face on our $10 bill. And that is the face of our wonderful Wanda Desmond. And she's been a great pioneer, even in the province of Nova Scotia, living in Halifax. There it is. She's actually been compared to somewhat of a Rosa Parks. Um,
yes.
and
Yes.
just kind of looking at her life, she was born to parents of mixed race. So her mother was white, her father was black. She's one of 10 siblings. So grown up
Wow.
in a middle class family in
Wow.
Halifax, which was pretty awesome to hear blacks growing up in a middle class
Mhm.
family, and they did pretty well for themselves. And so learning about Wanda, you get to experience or see life through her eyes.
Sorry, is it
She
Wanda or Viola?
Viola, I apologize. Viola Desmond.
Okay.
Sorry. Wanda was her sister. Sorry.
Right, right.
Viola, she had such a passion to better her people, better the Black community in Halifax. And so one thing about her is, wanting to better the Black community, she decided that, she wasn't seeing a lot of, salons or beauty products that were available for Blacks to
Mhm.
really gravitate to and to use for their hair. As you know, that our hair, it requires a lot more work and a lot of different products that is out there. And so she decided, I'm going to make sure that I solve this problem. And so she wants to go to beauty school and she wants to learn. But of course, in Halifax at the time, Blacks were not able to go to beauty school. So she had to travel. She had to go to I'm sure you've heard of Madam C. Walker, her school in
Mhm.
New York,
Mhm.
as well as go to Montreal and to get her learner her permit or license, as you want
Mhm.
to call it. She learns. She gets to come back to Halifax. And what does she do? She opens up her own salon, and she says,
Come
all
on.
of those that, want to take part and learn of me and gain some of my knowledge, use my products. She says, I'm going to open my own salon. And so she gets married. Her husband actually also owns his own barbershop. So
Okay.
they join forces, and they
Hmm.
open up this facility that has a salon and a barbershop in one. And she's getting a lot of clientele. She serves a lot of people of the African Canadian descent. So it was really a plus for her. And so it's interesting to note where her life starts to kind of take a turn. She and her husband, they decided to travel to Sydney, and they want to just kind of market their product, get it out there, sell their product to other African Canadians or African Americans. And so, while she's there, she decides, I want to take a break and I want to go to see a movie, right? So
Mm.
she goes and she finds a movie theater, and she's like, okay, let's go watch that movie. Now, at the time in Halifax, the movie theaters were not segregated. So she's coming in thinking it's not going to be segregated. We're fine. Let's just
Mhm.
watch the movie. And so one of her plights is she was quite severely nearsighted. And so she buys a ticket, and she decides to go to, the floor that was only designated for whites only. There was no signage, so she didn't know.
Oh, wow.
She moves herself to, the front of the theater so that she could see better. And
Hmm.
so it's a white only area. She can't sit there. So someone comes and says, I'm gonna need you to move. You're in the
Wow.
wrong area. And I'm sure
Mm.
they said that with a lot more force, but
I'm sure. Mm.
she was like, no, I'm not moving. That same spunk, that same spirit of Rosa Parks, if you want to call it that. But she says, no, I refuse to move. I want to sit here. I bought my ticket, and they said, you need to move. And so she's like, okay, can I just buy another ticket, for another section on the balcony? And they said, no, you need to move. And so they forcibly remove her from the theater. And in doing so, they're pushing her out of the theater, that she actually lands on her hip. She injures herself
Mm. Oh, my.
the rest of her life. And as they push her out of the theater, they arrest her. She spends about, I think, 12 hours in jail. And while she's in jail, it's almost like they try to come together to find some sort of a charge that they could lay on her. And so they charge her, with a fine of $25, which was quite a bit back in that time.
Back then, that's right.
Yeah, absolutely. They charge her this fine, and they say that, it's because of tax evasion. Tax evasion.
Oh, my
So as
word.
if
Yeah,
they were trying to pin something on her.
that's
And
right.
so, she's refusing to pay this tax. She's thinking, no, not at all. You want to tie it to my business? Not at all. I refuse to pay it. And, she tries to get counsel and, trying to see if she can get this charge off. And it's so unfortunate because, I was talking to you about this the other day, is, all her life she's fighting and fighting to get this charge dropped. And sadly, she was not able to, even until the day that she died. And she died, I believe, at the age of 50 to a gastrinal infection, a bleeding.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so she died quite young, but she never was able to live to see this charge dropped. And it wasn't to several years that her sister Wanda, along with her cousin, was able to fight to get this charge dropped. And she was eventually awarded a free pardon, which was the first in Canada to a Black individual,
Okay.
by way of her sister for, pushing that.
Hmm. Hmm.
And so that's why we're able to really see her face, on our $10 bills, is
Isn't
because
that
that's her
amazing?
sister Wanda there. At the age of 95, she died, Wanda. But she
Okay.
fought. Yeah, she really fought to get this charge dropped. Her sister unfortunately did not get to see the day, but just having this woman just pioneering, the cause of refusing to be at a place where segregation existed. That even the Canadian government had to apologize,
Wow.
to her in
Mm-hmm.
death, had to apologize for, segregating and treating her in such a way. But, just hearing this story and what she did, it really just teaches us to really to persevere and to fight for the things that, we deem, morally sound and fit, and to
Yes.
push,
Yes.
you know, and
Yes.
and you know, if we want to talk about Rosa Parks and so many others who refuse to be put into, a corner, refused to be backed into a space that was not
Yes.
befitting of who they were. She never committed a crime, Viola. She never, stepped out of, you know, this box that they had put around her to act with
Hmm.
class and
Hmm.
grace, but she
Hmm.
stood for what she believed in. And it
Hmm.
really teaches us, as whether we're, in our jobs or career, just life, but to be, walk in, such a place that we can hold our head up high and
Aye, that's right.
yeah, absolutely. And
Yes.
to
Yes.
and just to walk with so much grace. And I really want to, exemplify that character, that I can demand respect because I myself walk in it. And so, yeah, Viola, she was a wonderful woman. She was a civil rights activist even in her time. And so, I want to be able to certainly fight for what's right.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah,
Thank you.
just learning
Yes.
so much of these wonderful
Wow.
people.
And you
This
use the word, and I think we use the word, is to persevere, is to
absolutely.
press, right? In spite of the challenges, in spite of the trials and the
Yes.
tribulations, and all the obstacles that we face. I say, where
Absolutely.
there is a will, there is a way. The passion that these people had, the drive that they have.
Yes.
We today, I believe, have better opportunities. And so, what I'm getting from this, Jonathan Katura, is that we must seize the moment. We have
Yes.
so much opportunities that we are not really accessing.
Right.
So I say to all of us is to persevere, my children, persevere, press, never feel satisfied, never think that we've arrived. There's always more to achieve, more
Absolutely.
to do.
Yeah.
There's so much things. I won't even start to say what we can do, right? As individuals. And I remember, as I say about the porters coming together, what we can do as churches. I pray that even churches, as we're going to be talking about next week, the Black churches in Canada, if we could only come
Together, come together.
and be that voice, we can change laws, right?
Yes.
The government will have to stop and listen and
Mm.
take note of what we are advocating for. So thank you again to our guests, Sister Carol. I bless you, and to Brother Michael, Elder Michael Dawson. Thank you so much. Blessings to you again. May you all be blessed in your desires and your dreams and your visions. May they come through. Let's persevere. Let's be resilient. Let's not think that, we're entitled to certain things because, our color of our skin. I know sometimes when, one of our Black members or folks open up a business, we all of a sudden think, or because we're Black, we should get it on sale. We should get it,
Mhm.
we should pay less for things. No, no. If you're going to
No.
support and
Support.
stop thinking
Absolutely.
that, oh, well, come on, man, I'm your bro. I'm your bro. I'm your this, I'm your that. You can take out $20 off of me. No, support them. If it's $20, pay the full $20. As a matter of fact, you should give 23,
Extra tip.
right? Give that tip, give that extra tip, right? So we all can be successful. This has been an awesome episode.
Awesome.
Our viewers have been engaged, and we thank you all for all of you who have been in and just making your comments. I'm seeing some of the comments. Barbados
Facebook,
is in the house.
YouTube.
Amen. Facebook, and there's YouTube also. Please, again, make sure, how do we say it, Elder John, that they click that notification so you're notified when we are coming in. All
Yes.
right. And share, pass this around. This is good information, and I hope that this has intrigued you and inspired all of us to go back YouTube and wherever we got to find some information, because there's so much information out there. Right. Closing words, Elder John, because I think I cut you off a little bit. Just any closing words?
No, didn't cut me off at all. I think this has been
Okay.
a phenomenal a
Okay.
phenomenal topic, and I think we do need to keep having this conversation.
I'm
Yes.
telling you.
Absolutely, right?
I'm
Because
telling you.
not only are we standing on the shoulders of giants who have gone on, thank you so much, Katura, for bringing that in terms of
Yes.
looking at and learning the story. We have our own little Canadian Rosa Parks,
Right.
and we may not necessarily be seeing it today, where black people are being asked to to be to come out of a movie theater or to sit at the back of the bus. But we still have black people today that are asked to be, are being asked to be removed from the boardroom,
Mm.
or they're
Mm.
not being asked to do certain positions. Today, as you brought Pastor Morris, there's still not a lot of black people working in the construction. There are no black owners who are owning the construction companies. With all these condos and all these homes and shortages of home, why not have some more black people that are in those positions? And there are some systemic things that stand in the way of that. So we have to continue to fight if we're going to see any change. And I hope everyone understands the fight is nowhere near done.
Right.
It may have been 40, 50, 60 years, but we're still just going. Racism exists in all cultures that we have on this planet, not just in
All
North
cultures.
America, whether
Yeah.
from
Mm-hmm.
Indian, Chinese, whatever you want to call it.
Mm-hmm.
There's always a racism that exists, and particularly against anyone who's darker color in all cultures. So it's a big battle, and something that we all have to be mindful and aware. And it starts with education, and that's why we're doing this program. So I think this has been a phenomenal program, and I'm looking forward to next week for sure. Absolutely.
Absolutely.
God bless you. Love you all. Thank you for joining us. We're here next week, same time, same place. God bless. Have a blessed week.
God bless.
Happy Black History Month. We continue next week with history of the Black churches. That's going to be amazing. We've got Dr. Elaine Spencer coming in, and we'll just see. We'll go one day at a time, and we'll see how that's going to work out. God bless you. Love you all.